Hi, I'm John Little, and this is the ShockCast for Friday, March 30th, 2018, but recorded on Saturday, March 31st, 2018. If you have been a Christian for long enough, you will have noticed that God will often move you from place to place by first breaking the ties where you are now so that you can go where you need to be. It's never an easy thing to go through, but it always results in a blessing, often an unintended blessing. So as we seek or see the skies darken around us, we should welcome those times when God breaks the bonds that keep us where we are so that we can be where we need to be. I just wish that the process wasn't so painful. By the way, please note, Hotmail and Outlook.com are still blocking the shock letter. The same goes for, apparently, Yahoo.com and even Gmail. Getting them to stop doing that is difficult. It is unclear whether this is an attack by Microsoft or merely the result of malicious action by individuals. Lord willing, Hotmail, Outlook, Gmail, and Yahoo users will be able to receive the shock letter in their inbox soon. Worse, and this bothers me probably most of all, I won't be able to respond to any of your emails asking about this if you come, or if you are using an email service as what I have described above. Unmoored. On Sunday, Mrs. Little and I became unmoored. Our church here in Taipei suffered a coup attempt by a group of wealthy men and women who took advantage of a temporary lack of leadership. Our wonderful pastor, for health reasons, had to retire at the ripe old age of 87. And this group decided that they were the true authority of our church. They claimed that their authority was conferred upon them by the Taiwanese government, and therefore had the right to take over the church. I'm still in shock over this, and I can hardly believe it, which is why I'm sharing these awful details with you. This event also cut our last tie with Taipei, and this is what I mean by the use of the term unmoored. We are no longer moored to our current location, and we have been feeling God's tug in our lives, pulling us away from where we are. The only question is, where do we go from here? No, I will still be writing articles for Omega Shock, and I will continue to do so, the ShockCast. I'll continue to do the ShockCast. I can do that anywhere. So maybe I should ask the question a bit differently. Where should we go? When Mrs. Little and I came to Taiwan, we were searching for what God wanted us to do, and we very quickly got plugged into a ministry that did evangelism on college campuses here in Taipei. There are more than 45 colleges and universities operating in the Taipei area, and we were directly involved in 4 of them. It was an incredible blessing. Lives were changed for eternity, and because of this ministry, we were a small part of. Of course, I quickly began having trouble juggling this ministry, Omega Shock, and that ministry, and eventually we had to reduce our participation in the evangelism. But until last year, we still remained responsible for 1 college campus. Then God showed us that we weren't needed there anymore, which is kind of an ouch. Others were doing a good job at what we were also doing, and maybe even a better job. And we needed to step out of their way. So we did. I've been through this kind of process enough times that I started to see that God was getting us ready for a change. However, we still had our responsibility towards our church. We had responsibilities that could not be laid down without God telling us to do so. Well, we got the message on Sunday. I'm still grieving over what has happened, and I pray that God doesn't hold that against them. In fact, I pray that this is actually an opportunity for our English-speaking church to change direction and be more active in the lives of Chinese-speaking men and women. But this is in God's hands. One of the reasons why I write this is because some of you are facing some of the same kinds of unmoorings. You've devoted your life to a certain place and a certain group of people. You've done your best to serve God where you are, and now you need to move on. I know this because you told me. Some of you, that is. And if some tell me this, then I know that a lot more are in this struggle. For some of you, it's your first time. For others, not. But for all of us, it still hurts. It feels like your heart has been ripped out and stomped flat. You feel mangled. You might even feel betrayed, and if you aren't going through that now, it's coming. A great catastrophe is barreling down upon us. I've said that a lot, and I've been saying it for 7 years. It's still coming, and most of us will not survive it. The question is whether you are in the right place for the service that God wants you to perform in the midst of what is about to happen. If you aren't, then God will trim away at the ties that moor you to where you are so that you can be directed to where you need to be. My hope is that you are exactly where you need to be, that you do not need to go through what Mrs. Little and I are going through. But I venture to say that most of you are not. Are you in the place where God has called you to serve? If you aren't sure, then now is the time to pour out your heart to God, asking Him for direction. He will give it, but often in ways that you could never have predicted. Our lives in Taiwan here are an example of a series of such miraculous events that I could never have predicted in a million years. In fact, as I think about this, I should share something that I have started to ask God for. And it is literally this pattern of prayer. Lord, if I have any free will at all, I give all of it to you, that your will would direct my life instead of my own. As I have told many of our students over the years, I do not know how much free will I actually have, and I know that if I have any, it's not very much. But whatever free will that I do have, I freely give it to God. In fact, I don't want it. I do not want my free will. I want God's will. To put it another way, the first sacrifice that we all make when we choose to follow Christ is our own free will. When you choose Jesus, you are choosing to give up your own direction for your life. You are choosing to have God direct you. If you are a Christian, a true Christian, you have already made the decision to sacrifice what free will that you have. I'm just putting that sacrifice into words. But let's get back to the main point. As you seek to follow God, there will be painful moments in time in which you will become unmoored. It will be awful. It will be confusing. You will even wonder at what just happened and whether there is something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just being moved elsewhere to serve God in the best way that you can. There are no accidents for those who have submitted their lives to God. It's just not possible. So let's embrace this process as best we can and pray for those of us who are going through this. In my research for this week, I came across the France shooting that was at it was a gunman at a supermarket in France, and it happened the previous Friday, not yesterday. And this should have been screaming across the headlines of every major newspaper in the U.S. Why wasn't it? Here's a big reason. Those mindless teenage morons marching in Washington, D.C. in support of gun confiscation. France has horrendously tough gun laws, and they aren't working. And this supermarket shooting is an absolute proof that gun restrictions do not work at all. But the press do not want you to know that. They want you to be fixated on those teenage morons running around Washington, D.C. Why do people have to be so stupid? And then there's another rather interesting video by a very articulate guy named Jason Riley. And he's black. And he knocks it out of the park. He accurately and cogently describes the problems facing the black community and why they are facing them. He describes the problem and names names. But there is one name that stands above the rest, Lyndon Baines Johnson. If there is anyone who is responsible for the damage to the black community, it is him. And his cynical ploy was designed to capture the blacks and enslave them to the Democrat Party. He even said so. The blacks fell for it, and here we are. And I am so sorry. I think that I will keep my eye out for Jason Riley. He looks like someone to pay attention to. And then this one. Andrew McCabe. What a dirtbag. I remember when Robin Gritz was forced to resign. And I had heard that there were problems with McCabe. In fact, I was hearing about a lot of problems with McCabe. How is it that someone like this guy can turn so bad, so evil, so petty, so disgusting? But of course, we have so many examples of this, so I probably shouldn't even ask those questions. Well, here's an interesting point, and it talks about the retreat of globalization. Is there a retreat from globalization? Well, it's from the article, "This is the end of the liberal order, but at least no wars yet." Well, if you track the transportation of goods across international borders, the inescapable conclusion is that there has been at least a halt in the growth of globalization. Is this the peak? Have we reached peak globalization? Some of you will scoff at this idea because you know that the ultimate globalist is coming. And I agree that he will be the ultimate globalist and that he will be the one who will unite the world in a way never seen before. But that will not be happening under normal conditions. Please understand that because it's important. If the world continues as it has been, the Antichrist is a long way away. Maybe 1,000 years in our future, 2,000 even. However, the world will not continue as it is now, and that's the key that all of us need to internalize. For the Antichrist to rise to power, there will need to be an earth-shattering catastrophe. The fear and unrest that this catastrophe creates will force the leaders of this world to give their power to the one man who can rescue them from certain destruction. That is the only way that the Antichrist will be able to take over the world. To convince the rich and powerful to give up their power to him. If you still remain unconvinced, just look at history. Napoleon, Hitler, Julius Caesar, and a host of others all used terror, greed to take over their nations. I believe that this catastrophe will be Ezekiel's fire, and I would dearly love for you to prove me wrong. This next one, the science of a vanishing planet from the automatic Earth, is scary. It should scare you. The world is being systematically destroyed, and very few seem to be paying attention to what is happening. Did you know that 75% of insects in Germany are gone? And with the purchase of Monsanto, Bayer has become the #1 reason for why this is happening. Oh, and that reminds me of something else that Bayer was responsible for: the Holocaust. Without Bayer, there would have been no Hitler and no World War II. Without Bayer, there would have been no Holocaust, and Bayer helped produce the gas that murdered millions of Jews. And when you read the GM Watch article, your head will explode. Did you know that Bayer created heroin? And now they've bought Monsanto. When will they stop murdering the innocent? There's another one. Bothers me a little bit. Donald Trump captured the soul of America. And then he did this, and I'm quoting from the article. Trump's new war cabinet of John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, Gina Haspel, and Mad Dog Mattis is arguably the most interventionist, militarist, confrontationalist, and bellicose national security team ever assembled by a sitting president. We cannot think of a single country that has even looked cross-eyed at Washington in recent years where one or all four of them has not threatened to drone, bomb, invade, or decapitate its current ruling regime. Close quote. Does that make sense to you? If it does, then you need to clue me in, because it sounds like Trump is going to war while taking us with him. Do we really know who Donald Trump is? Are you going to be ready for this? Then there's one about white farmers who are fleeing South Africa. Here is more on that South African land grab. It looks like I've missed something, but anyway, that's okay. We're all friends here. You know that land grab will be far more than a mere confiscation of land. They will murder the farmers that are on that land. They will rape and torture the women, the children, and the men. And they will make it as awful and horrific as possible. It's what the Africans have been doing to each other for thousands of years, and what they are doing to the whites right now. The next one is from James Corbett. A moment for wonder. I'm not a fan of James Corbett. He's an anti-Semite, and I despise that kind of thinking. His only saving grace is that he keeps his anti-Semitism quiet most of the time. He also has moments of real insight that encourages me to keep track of what he says, and this is one of them. In this piece, he speaks of the sense of wonder that he can now do what would have required lots of money and massive amounts of time while sitting in his pajamas in Japan. When the prophet Daniel was told that men will run to and fro and knowledge would increase, no one could have understood that until now. In fact, let me give you that whole verse. Daniel 12:4. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Daniel 12:4. Does this sound familiar? This next one is heartbreaking. It's titled Global Genocide, One Country at a Time, Episode 900, South Africa. And it's from John B. Wells' Caravan to Midnight. In this video, John B. Wells introduces his wife, Brendy, aka the Divine Miss B. Of course, she has been Mrs. Wells for a large part of that time. But I'm sure that she will always be the Divine Miss B in his eyes and in our hearts. I remember when John B. Wells interviewed me in late 2015 before the show began, I asked if he was married. He said no, but there was a twinkle in his eye when he said that. I think that we now know the reason for that twinkle. I'm sure that a host of people were nudging John B. in Brendy's way. I would love to think that I added my own nudge when I encouraged him to get married. I would love to end here on such a positive note, but that's just not possible because Brendy was brought on to talk about a coming Holocaust that will shake our souls and horrify all of us. It has already begun in South Africa, and Brendy is warning that it will not end there. This is Matthew 24:7. This is the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And no one is talking about what is happening in South Africa. No one, except people like you and me. Here is the write-up for the interview. We all have common blood, common ancestry, and what's more, we all have the following basic needs: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. On this landmark episode 900, Brendy Wells, Nee Richards, and John B. discuss the impending genocide in South Africa. From the history of the country to what our apartheid was really about, there are no holds barred when an entire people have been misrepresented and vilified, while the same globalists that cause chaos everywhere in the world now arrange for a mass extinction event. Global socialism seeks to deny each of these basic needs to the reverse order they were acquired, ultimately conspiring to perform genocide wherever it is tried. If you think your coastal oceans keep you safe, they don't. What is being practiced in smaller countries is being perfected to destroy the last bastion of freedom on Earth. And only your silence will allow this cancer to spread. Only your tacit agreement, quiet acceptance, will allow your children to be murdered in their sleep as millions are being murdered today. What does globalist genocide look like? How does it infect a body politic? What are the stages? What can a mother do when the media blanket of death roams your countryside? Tonight's show takes you into the heart of darkness, that is, global socialism. Puts your throat under the knife of its agents provocateur, casts the light of truth into the dark shadows of its minions, and gives you a ringside seat to what your media dollars have purchased. You can't run. You can't hide. Something wicked this way comes for your very life. Help us stop this slaughter before it breaks your own door in, before your son or daughter doesn't show up for dinner, because your baby is plucked from your arms and dashed to pieces before your eyes. Learn how, together. We may be able to stop it, together. This is a story you will hear nowhere else. Decide for yourself why that is. And then the write-up continues, and it is Caravan to Midnight. The CTM episode is embedded in the webpage. You can watch it there, or you can watch the YouTube video that I also include. And I recommend a subscription to Caravan to Midnight. For what you receive, it's dirt cheap. There is a ton of great content every week, and John is a great guy to listen to. Here's the next question. When will North Korea rise to overthrow Kim Jong-un? It's an interesting point from my favorite forecaster. Quote, the entire world is going to go nuts in 2031, 2032. There will not be a country that is spared from political and economic events. The risk of a serious famine in North Korea, which could result in the people rising up, will arrive in 2023. That pressure will begin here this year, 2018.7, which will be September 13th, 2018. This appears to be the turning point that is not just concerning North Korea. It is appearing around the world in many markets. The risk for political change in North Korea comes into play as soon as 2019-2020. Close quote. I'm uncomfortable with his numerical calculations, but he's consistently right. So I need to swallow my reservations and present his analyses. Wild Bill, the title is The Never Jews, coined from the Never Trumpers. Wild Bill for America came in with a message that should resonate with all of you. I think that he made a tiny mistake about Revelation 12, but it's exceedingly minor. The point is that Bill gets it right. This hatred of the Jews is obscene and an affront against God. If you hate the Jews and believe that you have replaced Israel, then you are an abomination in the eyes of God. No one replaces the sons of Jacob. No one. We were grafted in. And it looks like a lot of us have been grafted back out again. Do not ever speak against the Jews as a people. Ever. Actually, you shouldn't speak against any nationality. It's just wrong. But it is especially wrong to speak against the Jews. Especially. And then, Pope Francis, he went on to say, there is no hell. I'm struggling to understand this. The Pope believes that there is no hell? Really? I just can't believe it. And then for a few more articles, and then hopefully we will close, because Mrs. Little and I need to rush off to a Saturday evening church service. There's an interesting video about it's Casting Crowns plays "'Tis So Sweet" or sings "'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus." And Dottie shared this in the comments section and also gave me some background to this hymn. According to the story, it was a beautiful sunny day. Louisa M. Stead, her husband, and her daughter Lily decided to go for a picnic. They went picnicking on Long Island Sound. While having their picnic, the Steads heard a scream. It was from a young boy. Mr. Stead ran to the rescue. Louisa Stead and young Lily watched helplessly as Mr. Stead and the boy drowned. Their troubles were not over yet, however, and without her husband, Mrs. Stead became very poor and destitute. Yet God never left her. He provided for her always, and she and her daughter made it through. Louisa learned to trust God, and thus the words to the song, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." Shortly after this incident, Louisa and her daughter Lily moved to South Africa, where they became missionaries. Close quote. Now that is an incredible story of tragedy, triumph, and the glorious will of God. Thank you, Dottie. Well, as for the rest, we talk about why Donald Trump signed that horrendous $1.3 billion funding bill, omnibus spending package, or whatever you want to call that, and the lies that Pelosi and Schumer and Ryan and what's his name, dirtbag. I mean, it's just incredible. And then you notice that Kim Jong-un made a surprise visit to China. Interesting. What's going on there? And then we talk about Facebook, which is monitoring you, scraping your information. And then Facebook did favors for Obama, but we're going after them for doing favors for Trump. And in fact, they did more favors for Obama than for Donald Trump. And then we talk about the two pilots that saw, we had a bit of an earthquake. Two pilots that they reported seeing a UFO in southern Arizona. And then there's this poor student named Hogg, H-O-G-G. And there's a delightful YouTube that is doing a bit of a parody on this Hogg, and it's called Hogg Hitler. And I say, Heil Hogg. And then there are states that are about ready to collapse based on their being strapped for cash. Marin, M-A-R-I-N, schools do require sexual harassment training for their students because the students are sexually harassing the teachers. And then China is kidnapping people. And let us not forget the Flat Earth Society. There's a conference in 2018 in Denver. Don't miss out. If you want to go to the Flat Earth Conference, it's a global event. The other thing is and there's an interesting, in the process, or you know about the Stormy Daniels thing. Well, there's an interesting question. Why did 60 Minutes want to interview Stormy Daniels when they didn't want to interview the man that was talking about his homosexual relationship with Barack Obama? Well, anyway, we are about ready to close here. Let's see, I'm trying to make sure. Oh, dear, the woman that was murdered in France, an anti-Semitic murder. And then there's Jack Buckby. A year after the Westminster attacks, UK politicians have learned nothing. I'm not sure if you remember those attacks, but a jihadi attempted to attack the Capitol, or the government building or the Parliament building for the UK. And nothing was learned from that. Then Martin Armstrong, and this is something actually, I was trying to get to it. Why Syria has always been strategic, by Armstrong Economics. DRG shared this from the comments section, and she says this, quote, "Yet another interesting post from Armstrong on the strategic importance of Syria. Also interesting is the section about 2/3 the way down on how the only known surviving scepter of a Roman emperor at a time when they claimed to rule the world includes an image of the world on top of the scepter. And it is, wait for it, a sphere. China knew this also." And my response is yes. And let us not forget Eratosthenes, who actually calculated the circumference of the Earth to a surprising level of accuracy in 240 BC. I provide a link to Eratosthenes in the article. But let's go back to the article from Martin Armstrong. It's an interesting discussion about Syria and its importance. And this importance will play a key role in the coming of Gog and Magog. Oh, and all the importance attributed to Syria can also be said about Israel. Thank you, DRG. Well, and then I want to close with one last, or a couple of things about Israel. One of them is a massive sea change, you might say. Saudi Arabia opens airspace to Israel for the first time ever for Air India flight bound for Tel Aviv. This is actually a pretty big deal. I flew this route once, coming into Israel from Bangkok. It was actually, and literally, a pain in the butt, since it kept that butt in my seat for much longer than I wanted. And at 6'4.5", there's a lot more of me than most people, especially when wedged into economy class. Oh, and it's good news for peace in the Middle East. There's also this thing about this new Passover war threat. Hamas is attempting to swarm the borders, and we're actually already seeing some of the articles, and we're seeing action on the ground. And we've already seen some people die and some injured. And it looks like Hamas is trying to start a war. And the UN is doing their best to help them. And you can bet that the mainstream media is getting ready to help as well. And Israel is getting her hands tied behind her back, being warned not to use lethal force against those who are trying to kill them. And that makes me want to scream. The other question in my mind is whether Hamas is coordinating with Iran. Hamas has been getting help from Iran, so I'm willing to bet that Iran is involved. Will Iran join in the attack? Will this create the casus belli, cause for war, that Iran is looking for? Will this lead to Gog and Magog? I believe that the answer to that last one is a resounding yes, as are all the events of the Middle East. And this is pretty ominous at an ominous time. And remember that Gog and Magog also comes with a massive solar flare that I call Ezekiel's fire. And then there's this last one. This one is the one that will probably spark the most response from Iran. At least it will make them unsettled and maybe, hopefully, afraid. Report: Israeli stealth fighters fly over Iran. From the Jerusalem Post. I have been a critic of the F-35 ever since I discovered the pork barrel that was fueling it and the insane price tag that the American taxpayer had to pay to get it. However, the fact that the Israelis wanted to buy it, well, it meant that maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe. Now, Israel is proving the worth of this plane by doing undetected overflights of Iranian airspace. And they're saying that the plane can fly back and forth twice between Iran and Israel without needing to refuel. So, Israel can now strike Iranian targets with impunity, and the Iranians are now aware of this. What will Iran do in response to this threat to their nuclear weapons program? Well, that is the closing for the ShockCast for Saturday, March 31st, 2018. For those of you watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It does a lot. We're trying to increase our visibility here, or I should say I am trying to increase my visibility so that the message can get out. And I can appreciate every piece of help, every bit of help that I can get. Everybody, have a great rest of your weekend. May you be rested, and may your pastor give you the words that you need to hear for your spiritual life. Thank you for taking the time to listen to what I had to say.